3 ways being with a narcissist changes your brain on a chemical and biological level. Now, every client that comes to me who is trying to heal from somebody on the narcissistic spectrum is desperately trying to understand what the hell they've been through, desperately trying to understand how they can heal from it, and desperately trying to understand how they can never end up in this situation ever again, because it is one of the worst things you can go through. And what I always aim to do with every client is explain, yes, how they've been affected on an emotional level, a physical level, a mental level, a life level, but deeper than that, to help clients not question themselves anymore, to find grieving what was real and what wasn't real easier, to not feel like they're going mad, and to not want this person for love nor money. Because ultimately, if we don't fix and reverse the damage caused to your brain on a biological and chemical level, you will either rebound back to this person at some point or other, or you will end up in a very similar type of relationship again. And that is the last thing we want. So number 1. When we are often in a narcissistic relationship, there is a string of emotional manipulation. There is a string of invalidating everything about you, idolizing you at the beginning, and then ripping you off of that pedestal so fast that you are practically begging them to put you back up there again. Tons of gaslighting, tons of poking holes in your self-esteem and your self-worth. And all of this is like putting your brain in a blender. And when your brain comes out of that blender, it has rewired itself. It rewires itself to constantly question itself, to question things that have happened, things that have been said, to question what you really think and feel. It completely distorts your perception of what is real and what isn't, what's okay and what's not okay. And all of a sudden, everything you thought you knew about yourself, you suddenly don't feel as confident in. So the neural pathways have been changed from being able to see things clearly, to feeling you are enough, to knowing this treatment is wrong, to being able to recall events and trusting how they made you feel, to all of a sudden not being able to do any of those things and doing the complete opposite, as I mentioned. We have to rewire your brain again. Now, this sounds intense. It isn't. But we have to look at those pathways and we have to change those pathways back to what's healthy so that you can see who this person is, how they treat you, how this is unacceptable, the way things really went down, and actually heal from that. And not have to lay in bed every night questioning whether you're going mad, whether you're the problem. Number 2. Your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that says, hello, danger, stress, run, is consistently activated because you walk on eggshells 24/7, because you're worried about this person leaving or having huge reactions or cheating or lying. And that part of the brain is not meant to be on 24/7. But when it is on 24/7, you are consistently living in a state of high cortisol and high adrenaline. Which means, again, your brain starts to rewire itself to live in a constant state of anxiety, which is almost like the antidote. If you're anxious, your brain is consistently looking ahead, consistently trying to figure everything out before it happens to try and keep you safe. But what does that do to a person? Well, it makes you physically unwell, mentally, emotionally unwell. You live in a place where you don't even know who you are anymore. You can't focus on anything else other than this person, what they're doing, how they're feeling, what they need from you. And everything you say or do, you question. Because God forbid you get something wrong and this person has that reaction, or worse, leaves, which in that moment is your idea of absolute hell. So we have to take your brain out of that constant state of stress. We have to turn that button off, and we have to create a sense of safety in your nervous system and in your psychology. If we don't, you will enter relationship after relationship and have an anxious attachment style. You will consistently feel you are not good enough, meaning you end up in more relationships where people don't treat you the way you deserve because you don't have that sense of self. We have to turn that part of the brain off and get it into a normal rhythm of it can come on when it needs to, but it can turn off when it needs to too. Number 3, because of the dreaded push and pull dynamic of a narcissistic relationship where one minute they are reeling you in, the next minute they are throwing you off of the edge of a cliff, metaphorically, the trauma bond develops. And a trauma bond ultimately alters your brain in many different ways chemically. It creates cognitive dissonance where you know one thing logically, but emotionally you're on a completely different page. Consistently questioning your sanity and whether you are normal. And ultimately being in a situation where you believe this person is oxygen, when actually they are the person taking all of the oxygen out of the room. Trauma bonds do not just break, and I mention this time and time again on here. We have to give you the psychological map to say this is where your brain is, this is where it needs to be, and this is how we fill the gap. Otherwise, you will never be able to stick to no contact. You will always have this person on a pedestal. You will consistently think of them. They will live in your brain 24/7, causing havoc. And how can anyone ever get to a place of indifference around their narcissistic ex if we are not breaking the trauma bond? Now, what I do want you all to know is when you do rewire your brain, when you do work on these things from a chemical and biological perspective, you can absolutely feel indifference towards your ex. You can absolutely feel like they could knock on the door tomorrow and you have not a care in the world. But expecting change, fundamental change that has happened in your brain to just bounce back after such a horrific experience that you have been through is wild. You have to follow a psychological map to ensure this never happens again.